The Blocktalk podcast started because of my passion for the property management industry. I wanted to start a conversation and add some value within the industry with a diverse range of people and professionals who can add something extra. As we start out, my aim is that the podcast offers some useful insight into a variety of views, opinions, thoughts, and foresights from our guests, who include business leaders and industry experts. If you enjoy the podcast and want to find out any other information, head on over to brianwelsh.co.uk. Hello and welcome to the Blocktalk podcast with me, Brian Welsh, and Jax Bruce. Jax, how are you doing today?
Very well, thanks, Brian. I'm very well. Nothing really to report today. It's Thursday today as we're recording this, so looking forward to the weekend. How are you?
Yeah, I'm a bit demob happy. Actually, I go on holiday at the weekend, so 2 weeks of downtime. Well, actually, 2 weeks of downtime. 2 weeks of only checking my email once a day, probably. But, so today we have the pleasure of talking to David Doran, Managing Director with Paterson Management Services. David has been MD there for about over 2 years now, having been partner at parent company H&P for 18 years. David is also a former director of the Property Managers Association of Scotland and a fellow of the Institute of Residential Property Managers. David, great to have you on. How are you doing?
Good morning, Brian. Good morning, Jax. Yes, doing well. It's a lovely blue sky November morning. Not going on holiday like you, but certainly enjoying a bit more drier and less windy weather.
Are you managing any golf?
The occasional game. I get once a week, but I'm starting to decline that because of the weather. I'm very much at this age a fair weather golfer.
You and me both. I haven't played since September. So you've been MD now for just over 2 years. How's that going for you and your team? Because most of that has probably been in lockdown or certainly in COVID time. So how's it been?
Yes, it's probably one of the most interesting starts to a managing director career, where within a very short period of trying to find my feet, we were delved straight into the COVID pandemic, which, to be honest, was very, very challenging, but also very interesting and very exciting from a learning point of view, and it allowed me to really look deeper into the running of the company. So when we started planning for COVID contingencies kind of late February, and by the time we were put into lockdown in March and all the staff went home, with a good idea of what we were trying to achieve and how we were going to support our customers through that period. And it allowed me to come into the office while the staff were away and kind of run about doing a lot of the manual tasks that were needed to be done, supported by several individuals in various different areas of the business to help us there. But running around doing the mail room, collecting mail, doing all these things, and seeing the nuts and bolts of how the operation ran and how well it was run. And me speaking to me, it starts me looking at numbers and looking at how we can do things better, and that's really helped me understand the business a great deal more. It's also allowed me to engage more with our staff across the board, which has been great. So we've got more into a consultation basis and speaking to staff directly and understanding how this whole pandemic's affected them.
Yeah.
So it's been good. It's been, we've got a good, strong, positive group of people in here who are all passionate about what they do. And I suppose my role has been trying to understand, the wide range of difficulties, fears, problems that they've faced through this period, and try to match that to what the customers' needs and business needs have been. So it's been very interesting.
Good. No, I can imagine starting and then being thrown into that is not the easiest things of doing. But people possibly put off kind of learning about their entire business maybe, but you didn't have a choice, I guess.
No, that was it. It was good. I think we get into a good position of having staff working remotely for that temporary period or that emergency period that they had to. I think we quickly identified in the industry that we work in that creates its own difficulties, and we slowly worked our way back into the office, taking our staff with us on that kind of journey.
Excellent. So MD for over 2 years, just over 2 years now, 18 years with Hackney and Paterson. So was that a role, the MD's role, was that a role that you'd aimed for since the beginning of your career, or was that something that kind of came about in a different way? So talk to me about
that. I wouldn't say I've ever aimed in any of the roles or any of the jobs that I've taken to get to a specific point. I'm a firm believer that if you look at the destination before you get there, you're kind of predetermining possibilities of not getting to a destination. I've always been a firm believer that you just get into a role and get your kind of head down and work up to your maximum skill set, and that might mean you're successful at varying different levels depending on what that skill set is. I don't think in my career I believe I've had a particular talent. I think it's just hard work. I think it's more of an obsession. I came into this business with an obsession to understand more about it, and just drive hard and keep my head down and work. And I'm a firm believer in focusing on the product first and foremost, and that might sound strange when we don't make anything, we don't manufacture anything, we don't sell anything, but it's probably the fact is I think we have a product, and that product is delivering a factoring service. So I think that's where I started at, and every step of the way I simply looked at how do we make that product better, how do we make it more efficient, and I think through that your career develops and you find yourself naturally progressing into the role that suits your skill set and where you are in life. And as I said, everyone's is slightly different.
Okay. No, that is really, really interesting, actually, because I think lots of people start a career and go, I want to be this. So to kind of not set your sights on that and to just kind of work hard at everything you do, and then it takes you naturally to these sort of places. Yeah, I have to say that a big thing to me is kind of leadership and that sort of thing. So making sure that the leaders in a business are providing that kind of value to your staff and building the culture of a business and the values that go along with that. And I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, leadership isn't. You can't be a leader just in title. You can't expect people to work with you, follow you, learn from you. If you come from an angle that I am the MD, so you must do this, or I am your manager, so you must do this. I've always tried to bring people into the conversation first and foremost, and let them understand the decisions that are being made or the route that or direction that the company is going in, and listen to their concerns and almost either listen to their concerns and see the relevance of them and change the approach or kind of make them understand through your own detailed research into where you're going that it's the right thing for the company, it's the right thing for them, and that tends to engage people in your leadership. You earn their respect by letting them understand what you're trying to do rather than just I go way back to my days when I used to open up KFCs and went on courses on delegation and things, and it was always, the first rule of delegation is don't delegate something you wouldn't do yourself or understand how to do it yourself. So I think that's for any leader in any area, whether it's a manager, a director, or anything. That's first and foremost. The respect doesn't come the minute you get the title. That's when the hard work really starts.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. So it's been a challenging, obviously, couple of years with COVID and things like that. Where do you see the property I'll try that again. Where do you see the property management industry headed over the next kind of 5 to 10 years? I mean, you're a young man, so well, a lot younger than me anyway. So you're going to be around for a fair amount of time in this industry. Where do you see it headed?
Yeah, and I always challenge that property management industry. To me, it's the property factoring industry,
okay.
which kind of separates it a little bit from what goes on in England and Wales, who operate in a completely different system, and it's a regularly debated topic. But we're governed by the Property Factors Act, so I kind of see us as property factors. I've listened to a few of the podcasts. In fact, I've listened to all the podcasts you've done over the last few weeks. All have been great, and some really interesting people and really interesting guys in similar positions to me. And they talk of the image of factors and how hard it is. It's a perception of a negative industry, but to me, it's not. To me, that's just the same in every walk of life, where the negative always shouts the loudest, whereas when we drill down into the detail of people who have factors and are factored, the vast majority of these people understand the role that they play and understand the value that factoring companies bring to their properties. So the introduction of the Act, I think, has just solidified how well the industry is run. It's given us a framework to operate from that the vast majority of factors we're always operating from. But when you look at the complaints system that was put in place to, as they say, eke out the kind of rogue factors that they talked of, since 2012, there's only been 3 factors that have met that sanction, and the complaint ratio compared to other areas of housing is minuscule. It's below 1% of the industry. So that tells me that what Scottish Government have done have solidified and created a very successful industry. And I think the future of property factoring can only be more important to the built environment of Scotland and in the management and down south of England and Wales, because we deal with people's properties. That's our role. We administer their obligations to maintain their own properties. That's not always easy because of the ownership models in Scotland, where instead of down south where one person owns a building, you've got 300 people that own a building, all with their own views and ways to do it. But there is a distinct problem where, if you read any of the Scottish Government reports, the standard and the repairing standard of buildings across the country is in a terrible state. Add to that dangerous buildings, dilapidated buildings, cladding issues. The future of our industry really relies on Scottish Government now engaging with us as an industry and almost marketing us as an industry to the homeowners of Scotland, so that the homeowners of Scotland can better their own properties. And I think as we move forward, I'm heavily involved with IRPM and their whole. They've developed a diploma in factoring, which is just in the process of being tested to be launched. And that's us as an industry wanting to get ahead of where we see the industry going. The letting industry is already regulated in that way, where there's minimum training requirements. So we as an industry are saying, let's get ahead of that curve and get our staff onto these training, and so that when that regulation comes along, we're already there and our customers are already benefiting from that. And I think that should hopefully develop the industry more and more, and allow the staff that are and the people working in the industry to perhaps not be subject to some of the kind of poor behaviours that they're currently subject to. IRPM did a recent wellbeing survey for property management staff predominantly down in England and Wales, and some of the findings were quite horrific in terms of what they were subject to on a daily basis. And again, I emphasise that's the minority of people. That's the small 3-4% of customers. It's not the vast majority of people who are engaged with their factors, but we need to up market the property factoring industry. We need to show the people that the industry is good. It's got good people working in it, that they want to help the owners. That, as you said, that there's youthful people, and I'm glad that you said I'm at 43. I still find myself youthful, and trying to get away from that staid image of what many people have of property factors. Through we've been involved with CPL since 2014.
Yeah.
And through that we've developed a completely new culture, a completely new way of speaking to customers, communicating with customers, doing things, and that's been brilliant. And it's let the long-standing property factors who are maybe thought of as being stuck in the past, enter the future.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of great factoring companies out there, new and old, and you've got a lot of new factors coming in who are, again, having met many of them are good people with good businesses trying to do good things. But we've all moved on. We're all moving on to that mindset of the world's changed, the way people want to deal with people's changed, and I think that's the future of factoring, is being able to increase the image and the support from government, from politicians, of what the factoring industry can do for the built environment of Scotland, rather than looking at the small problems that will ultimately kick off in any industry.
Yeah, no, that's really well put, actually, and the stuff you've discussed there is really interesting, because to me it's like, okay, this is business to business I'm going to talk about, but there's a thing called equal business stature, and it means that there is equal respect in a relationship or a negotiation, whether you're the buyer or the seller. And a huge amount of companies these days have adverts about, you need to respect our staff and all that sort of thing. And respect should not be something that is only given one way. It should be something that is two-way in everything in life. And so, for that, Jackson and I were talking about that IRPM report, the wellbeing one, this morning, actually, coincidentally. And it really is astonishing, some of the stuff that came out in that.
Yeah, it's frightening. It's a shame, because our staff, other staff in this industry and other industries, and you look at retail, the government have already brought in legislation to stop retail staff being abused and being that was brought in this year. But these people are good, honest people. Mm-hmm. Many of them in similar situations, living in factored properties, but they're just themselves trying to create income for their own family, to better themselves, to create their own careers. And no, they don't. But again, they're not alone, Brian. As you know, you read it in the news every day. Nurses, doctors, bin men, anyone, all of these different people. There's abuse everywhere. And again, it is from the minority of people. And as a company, as other companies are doing, we're moving to a point of saying, enough's enough.
Yeah.
We want to engage with you in a positive way, and if you don't want to, then we'll just end the engagement process, and we'll deal with the remaining owners in that building that want to work with us. Uh-huh. And that doesn't always work, and relationships break down, whether it's through time or differences of opinion, and that's just life. And I think every factoring company, every company across many industries understand that a relationship between you and your customers is only as good as it is at the time.
Yep.
And if it changes and deteriorates and they move off, that's just life. That's what happens in life across everything. Mm-hmm. We just need to find a way of encouraging customers to stay and encouraging new customers, which is all about self-promotion.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, there's a whole other debate we could go into there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we'll not do that today, but maybe one for the future. So for where to for you now from here, where to next for David Doran?
Kind of on the same vein. I think as a position that H&P are in the industry, we've got a duty to look outside ourselves, and we've always thought that my predecessors and the others on the board have always lived with that ethos that we've got to look beyond our company and look at the industry and the promotion of our industry. So for me, whilst continuing to hopefully grow a successful business and make it better, and I suppose more importantly and more present is to change to the way the world has changed, and to make sure that our business is adapting and changing to do that. So that's my primary concern, is make sure that our business continues, so that the 120 or so staff continue to be able to forge their own careers, that the thousands of staff operating and contractors that are used in our customers' properties continue to be in operation. I think that's important, but to promote the industry, to me, is a big one, and to get involved with discussions with politicians, governments, PMES, IRPM, all of these areas to kind of upskill, as I said at the start, upskill the entire industry so that we can secure the kind of long-term and the longevity of not only our industry, but the properties that we're involved in. Obviously, it'd be silly not to mention, climate and COP26. We're in the middle of the fortnight of that. Our offices, as you know, are round the corner from us. And it's been interesting to go for walks at lunchtime and see the hustle and bustle around that area. But, listening to the other guests and reduction in carbon and all of that is great. And I think as businesses and as people, we all need to work on our own strategies, but to me, it's looking at realistic timescales. Governments are talking about the next 10 to 30 years to get to a position that we're, better off in terms of our carbon output. But to me, there's a more basic problem that we've got in terms of doing that with the current built environment that we've got. And when I talk about built environment, for people listening to this, I'm talking about blocks of flats, houses, the things that we're involved in. And to me, it's the infrastructure, and you touched on it previously about charging points. I would take it a one step back to that. We look at things like the buildings, the properties that are getting factored across the country, and I go back to the standard of dilapidation in many of these buildings, where some things are not wind and watertight, but we're talking about putting solar panels on a roof that's got leaks in it. So to me, there's a bigger fundamental problem that we need to solve in the immediate term, so that in the kind of immediate to long-term future, we can do it. And, we factor around, I think we're about 2,500 tenement buildings. And, if I look around the street, the percentage of charging points out these buildings must be less than 1%, even if it's anywhere near that, and even if you were to say, let's say you put 1 to 2 charging points in Dumbarton Road, at every half a mile, you could have 100 people wanting to use one of those charging points at any one time, and it's, how does that work? How does that allow people to go and meet their own strategy on climate, i.e. buy electric cars, if they don't have an infrastructure that they're able to do something with it? And to me, it's how do we solve that? And I'm not quite sure. I think technological advancements will help. I think I'm a firm believer that in 5 to 10 years we'll see car charging changing to something similar to we have in car park barriers or mobile phone chargers, where you'll drive over a parking space and the charger will simply be under the ground and will start charging your car. Which will then allow a greater ability to put that infrastructure in place, almost like you're doing with the fibre lines and stuff at the moment.
Sure.
A similar vein to that, and that cars will start to have. Well, most cars these days are now got apps in. You can load apps into the car. Where like Ringo, you might have one where as soon as you park over it, the meter starts ticking unless you stop it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's one for you, Brian. You could maybe start another. You've started a few different things. Maybe that's your next one, a business to add into your portfolio where you've got apps that are going into cars for that kind of purpose.
Yeah.
But I think
sorry, on you go.
No, I think we're going in the right direction, but I just think there's a lot of work needed, and it needs some serious collaboration, to get to the point where we can actually start really, with some meaning, making an impact onto the climate. But we really need, I think with factoring and the properties and getting our customers on board with it, there is that element of putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
You wouldn't build a brand new passive house on the old foundations of a house you just knocked down.
Yeah.
And I'd say you can't put a solar panel on a roof that leaks.
Yeah.
And that to me is the fundamental problem to allow us to change our built environment.
Yeah, no, I do get it. I mean, a couple of things you picked up on. Yes, you're right. If you've got and I don't really understand this sort of stuff in any massive degree, but if you've got a really bad EPC rating on a building, then you're probably going to do far more for the environment, actually dealing with the insulation of that building rather than sticking a parking point outside. So I do get what you mean. Actually, it's funny because after I did a podcast recently with someone and we were talking about electric cars and these sort of things, because I think I mentioned to you that I used to have a hybrid car, that I sent back because it kept breaking down and obviously didn't drive for a while. Actually, I spend a huge amount of time. I split my time between the South Coast and here, and one of my biggest bugbears is lane hoggers. So I think we should put an electric charging point in the middle of the inside lane so that everyone drives in it, which would be a fantastic idea. Which another thing, you're talking about driving at a car park and sitting on top of it. If it's in the motorway, I don't know, that's pie in the sky stuff probably. But the other thing I mentioned on a previous podcast that there's no charging points in my parking zone area in Glasgow. And actually there are now, for the last 6 weeks, there have been the beginnings of them, although I don't think they arrived just before COP started or maybe a few weeks before that, and then they haven't actually commissioned them yet. But I live in an area where people don't have driveways or the majority of people don't have driveways. And I'll tell you, I could drive, within a 2-minute walk of my house, I can probably see about 30 either electric or hybrid cars. And there's going to be 4 charging points. So, and it's not like going to a car park and leaving after 2 hours. If you take your car home at night and park on the street and plug it in, you leave it there for the night. So, I would guess probably a very single figure percentage of the cars would be able to actually use that charging point. So, it is a big issue. It is a big issue.
Well, there was 3 installed outside our office on the road about 2 years ago. Now, the same 3 cars are charging in there every single day, Monday to Friday.
And they're there all day.
And they're there all day, the same 3 cars. And that's, we're looking at our kind of pool cars at the moment and saying, how do we change these to electric? Yes, in Newton Terrace, we're luckily, we own our building, so we might be able to put our own in and have some charging points in there. But our Edinburgh office is a different story. It doesn't have any private parking. It's all on-street parking, and the nearest charging point I think is over a mile away.
Yeah,
and it's how do you convince? How do you sell that to staff? Well, we'll give you the electric car, but you need to park it over 1.5 miles away. And at 5 o'clock during the height of winter when it's snowing, you need to maybe walk over that 1.5 miles to go. And, there's a whole range of problems as employers that come into that. But it's very exciting. It's hard. I think there's hard in times ahead, but I think as factors we can only support and drive that change. But I think homeowners' hands are tied, and our hands are tied through a lack of support, leadership, and structure.
Yeah. No, I get that. Okay, so you'll be glad to know that my questions are over for you, but Jax is the one that gets to ask 3 quirky questions at the end of every podcast. So, Jax, if you're not got anything to add to our chat about electric cars and things like that, then fire on into your question.
David, at the end of the podcast, we ask our guests the same 3 quirky questions. So the first one of those is, what's your biggest failure across your entire career, and what did you learn from it?
Having listened to the other ones, it's always it's a difficult question, and as others have said, without sounding cheesy, having gone through a few business things and listened to podcasts, failure's a horrible word. I'm not sure anyone does anything with the intention of failure. Might make a mistake and learn from it, but I would hate to class them as failure. But I suppose the biggest one for me is trying to run without understanding what I was in, or the detail of the industry I was in. In my late teens, early 20s, I worked for a local estate agency, letting agency. And when the owner was retiring, I convinced him that I could take on both sides of that business, which I did. And having only worked in the letting side of it, and not having really paid much attention to the estate agency side, it wasn't successful. And when I say it wasn't successful, it didn't grow. It just meandered on, and it got time consuming, and I was finding myself in positions that I didn't really know what I was talking about, and I quickly became isolated, and from there I took the decision that enough was enough, and it wasn't for me. But the mistake I made there, I think, was I didn't understand the detail. I lived on a perception that it would be easy, and I would find my way in how to do it. But when I crunched the numbers, it wasn't, and I don't think I was prepared for that. And I go back to, I remember hearing a quote from a UFC fighter of all people, Conor McGregor, who said, "Precision beats power, timing beats speed." And I think that fits across a wide number of disciplines, and especially in business. It doesn't matter how big you are, how much backing you have, and how well you can put yourself across. If you're not precise with your actions, if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your audience, someone else will, and they'll do it better than you. And then again, going back to some of the other casts, the theme of increased communication, I think that's another area that quote comes into, and it's not always about being the fastest, giving the quickest response. To me, that approach kind of tends to result in the wrong answer being given and people getting more frustrated. To me, it's all about timing. It's delaying a response to give you more time to reflect, or it's all about relationship building. I love working with people, and I learned that to be able to put them together, you need to do your research. You need to know your numbers. You can be passionate, driven, and bold, but if you don't fully understand what you're in, you don't have a passion for what you're doing and what your customer wants, it won't work.
Yeah. No, we lost you for a few seconds there, David, but I got that. I get what you're saying. Interestingly, something I've read lately about failure is that if you aren't, or I think it might actually been Brené Brown. I don't know if you've heard of Brené Brown. She's a vulnerability and shame researcher. She's got a Netflix TED Talk on Netflix and stuff, and she's written quite a few books about the power of vulnerability and that sort of thing. I think it was her that said that if you aren't failing, then you aren't trying. Because if you aren't failing, then you're probably not doing anything. So, which is a different spin on failure.
Well, as if you look at a sporting, if you look at Tiger Woods, the undoubtedly probably the most successful golfer in history. He only won 24% of the tournaments he played in.
Right. Wow.
So in effect, he did not win or failed to win a huge percentage of his tournaments, but he's the most successful. And I think that's in its Michael Jordan. How many baskets didn't he sink compared to how many he did.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at it in a negative approach, I think that's where you're. I think you've got to take the small positives and lead from them.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So the next question is, if you ruled the world for a day, David, what would you do?
Well, for all the things that I could probably say in this, and I probably touched on it earlier, is blame culture. I think I would try and bring all of the leaders of the world, whether that's businesses, countries, cities, politicians, religion, and try and make a pact banning the blame culture that I think the world has.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the world's problems could be helped if people looked for solutions before trying to apportion blame, and that's in everything. You know, I've got a 6-year-old boy, and you know, as parents, you know, if you walked into your room and found a bowl of cereal poured over the carpet, you know, the first reaction is to run around the house finding out who did it and trying to chastise them, rather than actually just cleaning up the carpet and stopping it being stained. You know, very simple analogy, but it ultimately leads to people getting shouted at, maybe blaming the wrong person, but what's left is a stain, and that's a reminder of what we did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we approach that differently, and our first step was to find the solution, clean up the mess, you know, our initial fight reaction would be dissipated, and we would probably calmly identify a way to stop it happening again.
Yeah.
And I think that scenario, if you look across the world, the same story repeats and repeats. You know,
Mm-hmm.
how many wars have started through blame in reaction that could have a solution. And, you know, you look in this country alone and you look at drug deaths, poverty, inequality. It's all about one, at the moment, from my perception, it's all about one side trying to put the other side down, you know, to curry favour or to win an argument, but they're rarely trying to find a solution.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think they're looking for it. So I think if we're trying to solve things like poverty and stuff, we need to look at the solution rather than trying to blame. And that, in the context of what I do, I think the world of factoring is quite similar to that. You know, there's almost a blame culture in terms of people collaborating to find a solution. So I think if we remove the blame culture and replace it with a culture of solution finding, I think that would be good. Very hard to do. I think you need to have some substantial power to rule the world and get people to do that. But yeah, I think that would be make a big difference.
Yeah, that sounds good. Solutions are always better. It does always seem like we're always presented with the problems, and no one seems to be wanting to find solutions. Yeah, I agree with that, absolutely. So the final question then, David, is when you are 70 and many years to come and you look back at your life, what will you be glad you did or feel proud of? Either it can be something you've already done or something that you want to do in the future.
I'm probably going to keep this one simple. I think I would just like to be able to sit back and think that I've made a difference to someone's life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it could be one person, it could be 100 people. I was, for my sins, I was watching Evan Almighty at the weekend with my boy, and at the end of the film, when Morgan Freeman, who plays God, reminds Steve Carell of how you change the world, and that was by trying to do random acts of kindness throughout your life. And it took me back to my dad, who sadly passed away about 6 years ago, and when I was asked to write his eulogy, and I looked at my dad's life, and he didn't do anything exceptional in terms of business and stuff, but what he did do was make a load of small differences to people's life, whether it was helping them with work in their house or helping them with advice. And I think if I can sit back when I'm 70 and say, do you know what, I've helped some people, and I've made a difference to some people by living my life in a way that every now and then when I can, to do some regular acts of random kindness. I think that's, I'd be happy with that. I think everything else around you is what it will be. You know, I think success is found in many different areas. You may be successful in business, successful in family, successful elsewhere. But to me, that would be it. It would be just that I can sit back and comfortably say that, yes, I made a difference to at least one person's life.
Oh, that's nice. Good. Cool. Thank you. That's me done. Brian, back over to you.
Thanks very much. They were excellent answers. Yeah, that was great. It was great listening to it. And to be fair, I mean, I've known you for a number of years since we sort of obviously CPL started dealing with the hacking and Paterson. But it's funny. I didn't know that about the early part of your career. So you meet people in life and you kind of know them from that point on. And actually doing the podcast has been really interesting because I've found out a lot about people who have, and what people have done in the past has been really good. Anyway, thanks very much for coming on, David. It's been great to have you on. And we'll get a game of golf when the spring appears.
When the weather's better. No, thanks a lot. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I certainly thoroughly enjoyed listening to the previous podcast you've done. I think it's as you say, it's good to get an insight and to feel others that are sharing views in many different ways. So it's been really interesting.
Good, excellent. Thanks for that. It's been great to have David on, and if anyone wants to get in touch with him, you can find him on LinkedIn. He's pretty active on there, actually. So again, great to have you on, David. Thanks.